Let me join with Brother Perryman this morning in giving each of our guests a good welcome today. We're so thankful for your presence. The weather was a little inclement last night, and the storm has passed by. We're glad that all of you are here today. I know there's a little game going on this afternoon. I'm not sure if any of us have a dog in the hunt in that particular game, so that shouldn't keep any of us away from our Sunday night service this evening. I'm starting a new series of lessons on Sunday night on the church that would be perfect. The church that would be perfect. I hope that sparks your interest, that you'll come and be with us this evening at 5 o'clock. Our theme for the year 2024 is Living for Jesus, and as one of those themes that's broken down into those 3 months, we're going to be talking a lot about love, and love as members of the Lord's church, and love how we ought to love one another and share in that good love. One of the good things you're doing, Brother Glenn also mentioned, is pack the pantry or pack the pulpit during this month. You have 2 more weeks at least that you can bring in. We would just love to kind of build a corral up here around me to where I'll have a little trouble getting around, and that would be wonderful. And the recipients of that would be people that are receiving the gift of your love by bringing some extra items when you go to the grocery. If you just pick up 2 or 3 or 4 things that you think someone might enjoy eating, that you would bring those, and that would be a great gift to our Christian Care Center. Our theme is the idea of love, and there's no better passage, I believe, than 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It's been our springboard for the last 2 weeks, and I'd like to begin with that passage again this morning. We're not going to read the entire chapter, but particularly beginning in chapter 13, verse 4, all the way through the first part of verse 8. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant, nor is it rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and love never ends. Another version says love never fails. And I love both of those for us to think about. We've been talking about the results of a love care quotient from about 8,600 different people were once polled on the idea of their love that they have for other people and that people have for them. So we're sharing a few statistics that might just go across the board on the way that you feel, and maybe not. You might say, well, that survey's way out of balance as far as I'm concerned because I don't feel I'm that way. But you might find yourself a deficit in some other ways. And so I hope you'll pay attention this morning. And one of the barriers to love could be these things. A question on a scale of 1 to 10, people were asked, how loving have you been to the following people? How loving you've been to the following people? They're listed on the screen there for you. How loving have you been to your spouse, to your parents, other family members, an elder, the deacons, a minister, other church members, close friends, our neighbors, those at school, or even our work associates? I don't know about you, but that just about covers the gamut, doesn't it? Everybody falls into one of those categories of where we have an opportunity to show love to someone in one way or another. You remember earlier, a couple of weeks ago when I launched this, we talked about the idea of the results are similar in the church oftentimes of how loved do you feel by these people? And so that's a good question. Do we feel love from other people that might be sitting on the same pew as you are this morning, or maybe on the other side of the building? Looking at relationships between love that is given to people and love that is received, of all the categories, notice that in each one of these I'm going to talk about this morning in these groups, members felt that they gave less than they received. Now, isn't that interesting? That people gave less love than they received from people. Well, that's an interesting thing to me. Maybe you're an introvert and you just can't see yourself doing any of these things. As I mentioned 2 weeks in a row, you don't get a pass on that. You just can't say, King's exegesis, I don't want to love people. So if you're an extrovert, that also tells you that maybe there's some improvement that we could make in being sure that we tell people from time to time that we love them. I think it's a shame that we give less love than most of us receive. And I think there's a lot of truth to that when we'll really stop and pause and think about it. We've learned that unexpressed love is one of the most common griefs experienced among people. Some of you are well read and you've read books by Leo Baskiglia, and he has written many books on the idea of learning to love and sharing with other people. And he made this great statement, and I want to quote Leo today. He says, "Why wait for graveside reflections to wish that we had better shared our love while someone was living?" How many times have we regretted not stepping out and saying something to someone, and then when we walk by a casket, we say, I meant to tell her how much I loved her. I meant to tell him how much I really loved him, and for his stance and for his abilities or whatever it may be. But then the recipient of that love never gets to hear those words. Now, I'm thinking back when I was a young man and my mom was at home. My dad was working usually, and she would do her share of work as well, of course, there at the house with 4 children. But I can remember, I know there were times when I told my mom that I loved her. But there's no time in my life that I will ever forget this day. The night before she passed, I went to her bed, and I looked down at her, and we thought she was there, but she really wasn't. But I called her name and I said, "Mom." And she opened her eyes and she looked right at me. And I said, "Mom, I want you to know how much I love you." And I will never forget. She opened her mouth and she said, "I love you too." And I will never forget that. And I would not take all the money in the world if you could exchange that with me for that experience that I had. Because little did I know, 10 hours later, my mom would be gone. Do we seize the moments to tell someone the last time you see them might be the last time you see them? Do we take the time to tell someone that? I'm going to talk about some things this morning that may be really close to home for some, and there are others you say, well, that doesn't affect me at all, and maybe it doesn't. How easy or how hard is it for you as a Christian to say I love you to someone, to other people with whom we are connected? That's the question. Is it easier or difficult for you to say to fellow church members than it is to other people? We might have a close friend at work that we might say something to, like, "Hey, have a great weekend. It's Friday. Enjoy your weekend. I love you." And we never tell anybody at church, any of our fellow members, that we really love them. Why is that hard for us? Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, we might want to rate each person as how easy or how hard it is for us to say, "I love you" to someone and to really mean it. You know, a lot of us are just simply not in the habit of doing that. I think I've told you this before, but I was well into my first or second year of college, my freshman or sophomore year, and I remember calling home and visiting with my dad, and he very rarely told me that he loved me. I knew he did, but he very rarely did. But something about when he hit a certain age, we ended every conversation on the phone with, "I love you." And I thought that was interesting, that it took the crust off of a man who grew up in a home where probably that wasn't shared very much. And I wondered, what was it that tweaked my father in thinking about that? What was it that changed his heart to the point to where we ended every conversation with "I love you"? And then even times after that when we were together, he would always kiss me goodbye. Now, you might think that's weird, but we're a hugging, kissing family. And maybe you're not. I feel sorry for you. Because you need to be a hugging, kissing family. Because your parents and your family's not always going to be with you. And don't be one of those people that walks by the casket and say, "I coulda, I shoulda, I woulda." And you make the decision today that you're going to be a loving, caring person. Beyond those two groups of people that we say we love and those that maybe we're close to that we don't love enough, of those we say I love you to our spouse some, those whose spouse is still with you, and you probably say this to other family members. Beyond these two groups, we get kind of out of our comfort zone, don't we? We get out of that element to where we're really not sure, and it decreases dramatically the less we're around someone. It might be to other relatives that we don't see very often that it's hard to say I love you to our relatives sometimes. To church members and other friends, it's difficult. But that throws up a red flag to me, and I ask the question, why? Why is that hard for us? Why is it difficult for us as people that are a member of a saved body of people called Christians, that it's difficult for us to tell someone that we love them? Is it because we really don't feel any affection for them? Or could it be that you just don't like them? But you can grow yourself into a better way of thinking by enacting what it is that you want to become. But the longer you stuff that and the longer you put it in the back of your mind, the harder it's going to be. Maybe it sounds funny. In any case, people sometimes seldom speak the words I love you to anyone. Yet in learning to love, as we're talking about for this month, we're people that we ought to begin with the hardest challenge around us. The hardest challenge around us saying that we love, but not just to the easy ones that it is to learn to love. That we really launch out and we risk a little bit. Another question in the love care quotient that I thought was really interesting that was asked is, how comfortable are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Are members that feel like it's okay to hug or to touch someone? Now, lest anyone misunderstand what I'm saying, I'm not talking about anything sexual. There's a right way to hug a woman, fellas, and there's a wrong way to hug a woman. But it is okay to hug your brothers and sisters in the correct way. There was a universal consensus that this was easier for some people to hug someone than it was to utter the words, I love you. Isn't that interesting? That they would get out of that comfort zone a little bit to risk hugging on someone rather than saying the words, I love you. And while hugging and touching is really an expression, if you will, of saying to someone that you love them, doing a loving action to someone, sharing your love with them is really the first step of the way that we feel in sharing that love and an attitude. And then finally, uttering the words, I love you. And it can be in passing. It can be during a conversation. Hey, I really want you to know I love you for that. That is one of the kindest things ever done. It's just so kind of you. I love you for that, brother, sister, whatever it may be. And then here's a wonderful insight to this. With the definition of love that we've had, we really don't need to feel love or even say love to do loving acts. Do you realize that? You don't even have to feel it. You don't even have to say it. But you're all capable of doing a loving act to someone and for someone. That you go out of your comfort zone and act like you love someone by demonstrating that love and sharing whatever it is. And if you go through those loving acts, I believe that we will eventually come around to the point to where that becomes an attitude with us. And then eventually we will say loving words. It is a well-known fact that behavioral changes, practicing things, the principle of change, that we must act the way that we want to be or the person that we want to become. So if you were raised in a real crusty atmosphere and your family didn't say I love you and didn't hug on you very much, could I just ask you this morning to learn to risk a little bit? And get out of your comfort zone, because you're going to raise children just like you are. And that cycle will never be broken. And so when we learn to risk a little, it may be a little edgy at first, but the more you do that, the more comfortable it will be, and you will become a person who is a hugger, a person who says, I love you. And it's through practicing something that we eventually become that person. Through doing an act of loving, through sharing an act of love, then we become loving people. And I hope you will take that on. It's also fascinating in the study results of the love care quotient, saying about I love you, is the perspective of the age groups. Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty of where we all live, because listen, every one of you are in an age group, okay? I'm included in one of those age groups. Apparently, it is easier to say I love you as we grow older. Isn't that something? Maybe that's God working on our hearts, softening us up, tenderizing us just a little bit, if you will, to the point to where it's easy for those words to roll off our lips. But maybe for some of us men, as we're younger, we're just absolutely too macho. We just can't see ourselves telling someone that we love them. I know there's a few exceptions to that, but the survey also said that it is young people who find it extremely difficult to say I love you to their peers. Now, I realize we have to be careful with that, but we're not talking about that kind of saying I love you. We're just talking about in general, hey, I love you. I appreciate what you do for the team. Hey, I love you. I appreciate having you in class. Hey, I love you for being here every Lord's Day, being here on Wednesday night. I love you for that. I love your personality, whatever it is. And we utter those words, but apparently the survey shows that it's hard for young people oftentimes to say that. The fact of the matter is the age group broke down, and I think it's interesting that it's an odd number. At age 66, the survey showed that it is easier for people that are 66 and older to say, I love you to other friends than it is for people, listen, under 20 years of age. So what a wide span we have from 20 to age 66. That there's this wide gap to where we have to learn to be that kind of loving person. And sometimes those that are 20 years of age and younger have the most difficult time saying that to family members. That would be, first of all, in my mind, a mother, a father, a brother, or a sister. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Why is that hard for people to say, I love you to a family member? I'd like for you to imagine the tremendous gift that we would give our young people if we could help them to understand, and this is where we as older people in the church could really help our young people. Could you just grab a young person sometime and put your arm around them and just tell them that you love them? Thank you for your faithfulness to Jesus. Thank you for your faithfulness while you're at school and doing all the things you do on your job. I just want to thank you, and I want to tell you I love you for that. How hard would that be? You know, if you're 66 or older, it comes pretty easy, the survey says. Now, if you're in that gap from 21 to 65, it may be something you have to work on. But you can pick out 1, 2, 3, or 5 and just say, I'm going to zero in, and I'm going to tell that person how much I admire them and love them for who they are. I wonder, could this be the missing ingredient in many churches that lack a vital, active youth department? Could learning how to give love be a part of the purpose of the youth group at the Brown Street Church of Christ? I think it could be. And you know, we are blessed, and we're not an exception to the rule because everybody's got a little crust on them. And we have to learn how to work that out. But we're very blessed. But I think there's always room for improvement, wouldn't you say? That we could do better at that in the future. Well, that could also apply to our young singles, our young marrieds, our middle-agers, older adults, people that we call prime timers here at this congregation. Consider another issue as it relates to age and to love. Is it more than a coincidence that church involvement has historically been lowest among young people, but has increased with age? Maybe there's a correlation there between not being told that they're loved enough and shown that love through a body of fellow believers who are more mature in the faith to help them along with their love. In growing churches, it's easy and it's common to see each group well represented. And a good indicator, I think, of that growth is that we are to be found loving one another inside the body. And at Brown Street, we are indeed blessed with many, many and various sundry age groups in this church. So who do we love? Well, there's people all around us that need love. Do young people just say hi to older people? Do older people just say hi to younger people? Maybe there's a wide gap there in the middle to where we ought to be more loving and understanding and patient with one another. That these love connections that are formed. Perhaps some of these young people never have thought about that term of love before, that's something that Christians do. You say, well, who, me? Who are these people I'm supposed to love? You mean, Brother Bailey, I've got to love my stepfather, my stepmother? You mean I've got to love my next door neighbor, my boss? I've got to love other people around me? You don't know those people, Brother Bailey, the way I do. They're difficult people to love. But you know, if you learn to love a little bit, you can make an impact on people. Maybe someone else could love them. We might say, well, that's the job of the elders. They're the ones that really need to be out there loving on people. And no, I tell you what, let's let our care center do that. They can come up here on Monday morning and Wednesday morning, and they can get all the love they need from our care center. Listen, we're missing out on a great opportunity to show our love to people that come through these doors and other places that we meet. Maybe someone else could love them, and maybe they could do a better job. But you know, Jesus didn't give the command to love one another just to other people. Jesus gave the command to me. And he gave the command to you as well to love other people. Someone might say, well, loving my friends is easy. Others might say, you don't know my friends very well. Some of them are hard to learn to love. Well, sure, we like them, but we get along with them. Maybe from a comfortable distance, as we oftentimes say. You know, it's easy to say, I love my wife, I love my husband, I love my family, my children. Of course we love those people around us. Maybe I could show more love about that. And the old joke is still true today. A man got married and they'd been married for several years, and his wife looked at him one day and said, you know, you never tell me you love me anymore. And he said, listen, if anything changes, I told you when we got married I loved you, and if anything changes, I'll tell you. Listen, that is not a good rule of thumb. And Valentine's Day is coming, and that's not the only day you need to tell your husband or your wife that you love them. You love them all the time, and we say that to our mates, to those around us in the loving family. It's easy to go from day to day, moving through the narrow tunnels of life and its activities, and look right past the people that God sometimes puts in our pathway for us to love. There could be someone right there hurting while we're rushing past them to go see someone that we already know very well. And God may have placed that person right there in the middle of the aisle of the grocery store or the classroom, wherever it may be, for you to have an opportunity to show some love. Well, we're not expected to become great lovers overnight. This is something that we work on and we grow in. But there are people in every category across the board of people that we ought to show our love to more and more. And you can be God's delivery system, as we talked about last week, being those conduits of sharing the love of Jesus Christ. Well, I want to close this morning by sharing with you a true story that happened about 150 years ago. It's a true story that took place in the Rocky Mountains. And the story illustrates how we can find the love of Jesus Christ in just about everything we do if we look hard enough. We've all heard about the 49ers in California, and I'm not talking about football now. I'm talking about the original 49ers where gold was found. And the yell was, gold has been found, gold in those hills. And so everybody moved there. But there was also something else going on in our nation a little bit around that same time, and the city was Leadville, Colorado. It was during the 1860s, and the country was in the midst of that great gold rush, and men by the thousands searched for their fortunes in the bottom of their panning tins. And they were looking for something that sparkled, something that was that precious yellow gold. And 16 years later, in the ruins of Leadville, there was now a ghost town that was once a boom town, but it now had shrank to hardly anything. And then nearby California, in Leadville, there was a group of a property that was called the California Gulch, taken from the 49er gold rush. It was the remnants of some old abandoned mines where people were looking for gold, and many of their sluice boxes remained there. And there was a few die-hard prospectors that could just rattle around looking for something at least a little bit that resembled gold. And yet the California Gulch, as they called it, had a nasty reputation. Something terrible was going on inside there, and they complained that the black sand that they were getting out of the ground would clog up their sluices and the rifles where the water would roll over it and leave the good, but it left behind this black sand. And it not only did that, but it stained their clothes, it stained their hands. And the black sand seemed to cover up every nugget that was there. They had to search diligently for it, and it was a lot of work. And so it became a mockery for anyone that was going to go there to find their fortune in gold. And when the prospectors came to Leadville in great numbers, they soon left. And they were discouraged. They were cursing. And the black sand that was there. And they moved away from Leadville on to other places to seek their fame and fortune. But there were two men. These are the men you need to remember. Their last name was Stevens, and the other man's name was Wood. William Stevens and Alvanus B. Wood. In 1874, these two men were convinced that there was still gold to be found. And they started buying up all the old claims of people that had left town and gone to somewhere else. And they bought up all these claims, and they decided they were going to work diligently and expand their efforts. But soon they too encountered the dreaded black sand. And it was becoming more and more difficult to find any gold. And so one day, one of them decided they were going to gather up a sample of the sand, and they were going to send it off to be analyzed. This is where the story really gets interesting. They analyzed the black sand and found out that the black sand had lead carbonate in it. And that lead carbonate was loaded not with gold, but silver. Stevens and Wood staked out that lode claim throughout the California Gulch there near Leadville and opened up the Rocky Mine, as it was called, and the first producing silver mine ever in the district of Leadville. They famously became rich in a matter of 2 years. That black sand, which miners dreaded looking at and sloughed it off and pushed it to the side, made prosperous people of two men who were diligent to look for the mother lode. The sandy California Gulch yielded as much silver as gold was ever found in Leadville, Colorado. Church, why would I tell you a story like that? I want you to know that all around you this morning, and this week when you go to work and to school, there are opportunities around us. People that look a little crusty. People that are a little hard to deal with. People that you just don't know if you can make an impression upon or not. And the opportunities might be hidden, if you'll allow me to say, behind and under that black sand, that crustiness. People who represent a wealth of meaningful knowledge, loving relationships. But if we cast them aside and look at them as a nuisance, an intrusion into our life, how is it that we can do what Jesus said, to love one another, when we don't make the effort? I'll be the first to tell you, it's easy to love the lovable. But it's hard sometimes to love the unlovable. And those are the ones that need Jesus the most. Our text this morning has told us that faith, hope, and love, these three things are important. But Paul says it is love that is the greatest of all these three. So may I encourage you this week that you learn to risk, that you learn to love people that just need a kind word. That you put your arm around someone, you whisper in their ear, I love you, I appreciate your faithfulness. I know it's hard right now, what you're going through. We just had a prayer this morning reminding us of 3 deaths in our congregation. You think these folks need some love? You know they do. But what about others? Could we be that church that's a city that's set on a hill? It can never be hidden. Wouldn't it be great if the Brown Street Church of Christ was known as a church that loves people? Loves people. That's who we are. That's what we ought to be. So this morning, as you think about learning to love, and as you think about this theme this year, living for Jesus all year long, it starts with us reaching out and loving other people and saying that we are truly Christians. May God bless you this week as you learn to live and learn to love a little bit more. There may be someone in this audience this morning who's just right on the cusp of saying, I need to learn to love more, and by doing that, I need to love Jesus more, and I'm ready to give my life to him. What a great day for you to do that. It'd be a wonderful opportunity this morning for you to be buried with Christ in baptism. Maybe there's someone here that says, I need to repent of my past. I've not demonstrated love very well, and I need to do better. Maybe I've done some things I shouldn't. Would you be willing to ask for prayers of that this morning? Others of you, just pray right where you are, that God will forgive you and help you to be better. But if you're in need this morning to come, we got a great song. Let's stand and let's be singing, and you step out. We'd be honored to serve you.
All things are ready, come to the feast, come for the table now is spread. Ye